The small leather case sat in the dirt between them. Corporal Marcus Webb of the 10th Cavalry had carried it for 3 years, through battles, through sandstorms, through hell itself. Inside was the only thing he owned that proved he had a life before the war, before the West, before all of this. It was a photograph, a tintype, his mother. The Apache woman kneeling across from him, Guyen, a warrior woman whose name meant wise woman, stared at the case with suspicion. They had been negotiating for an hour at this neutral meeting place in the Chiricahua Mountains of Arizona. It was 1879, and an uneasy truce existed between her band and the soldiers at Fort Bowie. Webb had offered tobacco. She had refused. He had offered coffee. She had refused. He was running out of peace offerings. Then, without thinking, he opened the leather case. And everything changed. Before we dive into this incredible moment of cultural collision, if you love these forgotten stories, hit that subscribe button. It helps the forgotten hearts bring these lost chapters back to life. To understand what happened next, you need to understand who Guyen was. She wasn't just any Apache woman. She was a warrior, one of the few women in Apache society who had earned the right to ride with the men, to fight with the men, to kill with the men. She had earned that right through blood. 5 years earlier, in 1874, her husband had been killed by Comanche raiders. In Apache culture, a widow had 2 choices: remarry or seek vengeance. Guyen chose vengeance. She tracked the Comanche war party for 6 days alone through the desert. On the 7th day, she found their camp. She waited until nightfall, then crept into the camp and killed the warrior who had taken her husband's scalp. She escaped with the scalp, rode back to her village, and performed the victory dance traditionally reserved for men. The Apache respected strength above all else. Guyen had proven hers. From that day forward, she rode as a warrior. But warriors aren't just fighters. In Apache culture, they're also diplomats. They negotiate, they observe, they assess threats. And that's why she was here now, kneeling in the dust across from this strange soldier whose skin was darker than any person she had ever seen. The Apache had encountered white soldiers for decades. They had fought Mexicans, Americans, Spanish conquistadors. They knew what Europeans looked like: pale skin that burned in the sun, light eyes, light hair. But this man? His skin was dark, darker than hers, darker than anyone in her entire world. When he had first approached under the white flag, she had almost shot him, thinking he was some kind of demon or spirit wearing a soldier's uniform. But he moved like a man. He spoke like a man. He bled red when a mesquite thorn cut his hand. So he was a man. But what kind of man? She had been trying to understand that for an hour. Corporal Marcus Webb was 26 years old and had been born enslaved on a cotton plantation in Mississippi. His earliest memory was his mother's hands, scarred and calloused from picking cotton from dawn until dusk, day after day, year after year. She had tried to protect him from the worst of plantation life, but there was only so much an enslaved mother could do. When he was 9, the Civil War began. When he was 13, it ended. When he was 14, he was free. But free to do what? He had no education, no land, no money. The Reconstruction South was a nightmare of violence, poverty, and broken promises. Black freedmen were being terrorized by groups like the Ku Klux Klan. Jobs were scarce. Hope was scarcer. So in 1872, at age 19, Marcus Webb made a decision. He walked to the nearest Army recruiting office and enlisted in the 10th Cavalry Regiment, one of the new colored cavalry units being formed to patrol the western frontier. His mother tried to stop him. "You're just trading one white man's orders for another's," she said. But Webb saw it differently. In the Army, he would have a rifle, a horse, and a uniform. He would be a soldier, not a slave. He would earn respect through his service. Or so he hoped. The reality was more complicated. He was sent to the most brutal, desolate posts in America. He fought Comanches in Texas, bandits in New Mexico, and now Apaches in Arizona. The white officers commanded him but didn't respect him. The settlers he was supposed to protect often spat at him. But he had one thing he'd never had before: a photograph of his mother. A traveling photographer had come through Fort Bowie 6 months ago. Webb had saved for weeks to afford a tintype portrait. He asked the photographer to make two, one for him and one to send back to Mississippi for his mother. The photographer had looked at him strangely. "You want me to photograph a Negro?" But money was money, and the man took the photograph. Now Webb carried it everywhere. It was proof that he had a mother who loved him, proof that he was a person, not property, proof that he existed, and he was about to show it to someone who had no concept of what a photograph even was. Webb opened the leather case. Inside was a small rectangular plate, about 3 inches by 4 inches. On it, rendered in silvery tones against a dark background, was the image of an elderly black woman wearing a simple dress. Her face was solemn, her eyes staring directly out of the image with a dignity that transcended the medium. Webb held it carefully, reverently. "My mother," he said simply, pointing to the image and then to his own chest. Guyen leaned forward slowly, her eyes narrowing. At first she thought it was some kind of drawing or painting. Apache artists created pictographs, stylized images on rock and hide. But those were simplified, symbolic. This was different. This wasn't a symbol. This was a person. Every line of the woman's face was captured, every detail of her clothing, the folds of her dress, the texture of her skin. It was as if a real woman had been shrunk down and trapped inside this flat piece of metal. Guyen reached out hesitantly, then pulled her hand back. She spoke in Apache, her voice uncertain. "Bidayili, is it alive?" Webb didn't understand the words, but he understood the fear in her eyes. He shook his head gently. No, it's like..." He struggled to explain something he himself barely understood. "It's a reflection. Frozen." But how do you explain photography to someone whose culture has no written language, no concept of mechanical image reproduction, no framework for understanding that light and chemistry can capture a moment in time? Guyen stood abruptly and called out in Apache. 3 other Apache women who had been watching from a distance approached cautiously. One was Dilth Clahan, Pretty Mouth, a younger woman known for her sharp intelligence. Another was Beshbalich, Metal Tooth, an elder who had survived 5 decades of war. Webb carefully placed the tintype on a flat rock so they could all see. The 3 women gathered around, staring at the image with a mixture of fascination and horror. Pretty Mouth was the first to speak. "Di, what is this?" Guyen explained what the soldier had tried to convey, that this was his mother, but also not his mother. An image, a reflection, a thing that was and wasn't simultaneously. Metal Tooth's face went pale. She had seen many strange things from the white men. Guns that shot many times without reloading, wagons that moved without horses, trains in the distance, buildings taller than trees. But this was different. This was power over reality itself. In Apache spirituality, everything had a spirit. Rocks, trees, animals, people. And one's spirit was tied to one's body, one's shadow, one's reflection in water. To capture someone's reflection permanently was to capture part of their soul. Metal Tooth stepped back quickly, making a warding gesture. "Bindi, evil magic." The tension escalated instantly. Metal Tooth began speaking rapidly in Apache, her voice rising. Webb didn't understand the words, but he understood fear when he saw it. She was backing away, making protective gestures, warning the others. Guyen held up a hand, silencing the elder. She looked at Webb carefully, studying his face. If this was evil magic, why would he show it to them? Why would he carry it so carefully? Why would his eyes soften when he looked at it? She asked a question in Apache that Webb didn't understand. Shima Shah, is your mother still alive? Webb saw her pointing to the image, then to him, then making a gesture that seemed to ask about connection, about presence. He understood. Yes, he said, nodding vigorously. Yes, she lives, in Mississippi, far away. He gestured east, toward the mountains and beyond. I haven't seen her in 3 years. This, he touched the tintype gently. This is how I remember her face. Guyen's expression shifted. She understood loss. She understood distance. She understood the pain of being separated from those you love. She knelt again and looked more closely at the image, this time with less fear and more curiosity. The woman in the image looked old, tired, weathered, but strong, like Apache grandmothers who had survived countless hardships, and her skin was dark, like the soldiers. So this strange dark-skinned soldier had a mother who was also dark-skinned. They were their own people, not white, not Apache, not Mexican, something else entirely. Pretty Mouth, emboldened by Guyen's courage, leaned closer. She pointed to the woman's face in the image and then to Webb's face, noting the similarities. The same nose, the same eyes, the same strong cheekbones. She spoke in Apache. Nijoni. Beautiful. Webb understood the tone, if not the word. He smiled slightly, nodding. Yes, beautiful. She is beautiful. Then Guyen did something extraordinary. She reached into a leather pouch at her waist and pulled out something wrapped in soft deerskin. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small, carved piece of bone, about the size of her thumb, with intricate scratches and etchings on its surface. She held it out to show Webb. The etchings formed a stylized face, simplified, symbolic, but clearly meant to represent a person. She pointed to the bone carving, then to herself, then made a gesture toward the sky. Her mother. Her mother was dead. This carving was all she had left, a symbolic representation, not a real image like his photograph, but still a way to remember. Webb understood immediately. The parallel was clear. Both of them carried reminders of their mothers. One was captured by chemistry and light. The other was carved by hand and memory. But both served the same purpose, to keep the memory alive. He reached out slowly and gently touched the bone carving, showing respect. Then he gestured to his photograph and to her carving, indicating they were the same in meaning, even if different in form. Guyen nodded slowly. The fear was gone now, replaced by understanding. The negotiation that followed was different from how it had begun. Guyen agreed to carry messages back to her band about potential peace terms. But more importantly, something else had shifted. Webb was no longer just a strange, dark-skinned soldier. He was a man who loved his mother, a man who carried her memory with him into battle, a man who understood loss and distance and the pain of separation. Before she left, Guyen asked one more question. She pointed to the photograph, then to herself, making a gesture that clearly asked, "Could you make one of these for me?" Webb's heart sank. "No," he said regretfully. "I can't. It requires special tools, special medicine." He gestured helplessly. "The photographer, he's gone. I don't know when he'll return." Guyen nodded, understanding. Some powers were beyond reach. But before she rode away, she did something that stunned Webb. She took the bone carving of her mother and pressed it into his hand. Then she pointed to his photograph and made a gesture. "You keep mine. I keep the memory of yours." It was an exchange, a bond, a recognition that despite every difference, skin color, language, culture, technology, both of them understood what it meant to love someone you couldn't see. Webb never saw Guyen again. The Apache Wars continued. The peace negotiations failed. By 1886, Geronimo's surrender marked the end of Apache resistance. But Webb kept that bone carving for the rest of his life. And somewhere in the Chiricahua Mountains, Guyen carried the memory of the day she saw a trapped soul in a piece of metal, and learned that even impossible magic could serve love. This story represents the collision of two worlds, one moving toward industrial modernity, one rooted in ancient spiritual traditions. The photograph was more than just technology. It was a symbol of everything changing in the American West. For the Apache, it was terrifying and fascinating in equal measure, evidence that the white man's world had powers they couldn't comprehend. For Marcus Webb, it was proof of his humanity, a reminder that he was more than a soldier, more than his skin color. He was a son who missed his mother. And in that dusty clearing in Arizona, that shared understanding mattered more than all the differences between them. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the Forgotten Hearts. Let me know in the comments, what surprised you most about this encounter? These are the moments that history forgets. These are the Forgotten Hearts.